$300. That's what Danny Reyes paid for the rusted Dixie Narco soda machine he hauled out of a divorced guy's garage in Bakersfield in March of 2014. The coil was shot, the bill validator jammed on anything newer than a 2009 dollar, and the previous owner threw in a half-empty case of expired Mountain Dew just to get the thing off his driveway. 9 years and 4 months later, Danny signed a purchase agreement for $3,200,000, walked away from his vending route and went back to doing what he'd always done on Saturdays anyway, changing timing belts in a two-bay shop behind his house in Tehachapi, California. He was 41 years old. He had never raised outside money. He had never hired a salesperson. He had never even built a website. What he had done, machine by machine, location by location, was build one of the most quietly profitable small businesses in Kern County. And he did it while still pulling shifts at a Firestone until his 34th birthday. The story of how a high school graduate with $4,000 in savings and a 2003 Ford F-150 turned a Craigslist gamble into a seven-figure exit is not the story you've heard from vending machine influencers on TikTok. It's grittier, slower, and far more instructive. And it starts with a number almost no one in the business gets right on their first try: route density. When Danny bought that first machine, he placed it in the break room of the transmission shop next door to the Firestone where he worked. He'd negotiated the spot over a lunch of carne asada tacos, offering the owner 10% of gross sales in exchange for floor space and an outlet. In the first month, that single machine cleared $187 in profit after product cost and the commission. Danny didn't celebrate. He drove to Costco, bought another 48 cases of soda, and started cold calling every auto shop, tire store, and small machine shop within a 15-mile radius. By August, he had 4 machines. By December, he had 9. By the end of 2015, he had 19, and he was waking up at 4 in the morning to restock before his Firestone shift started at 7. Here's where most people who try this fail, and where Danny got religious about the math. He kept a spiral notebook in the cab of his truck, and for every single machine, he tracked 4 numbers: weekly gross, weekly cost of goods, drive time to restock, and what he called the spoilage tax, which was anything that expired, got stolen, or got jammed in the machine. By the end of his second year, he had a brutal insight. Roughly 60% of his machines were generating about 90% of his profit. The other 40% were either breaking even or actively costing him money once he factored in gas, time, and the occasional vandalism. The losers had a pattern. They were placed in locations that looked busy but had what Danny called transient traffic: a car wash off the highway, a laundromat in a low-income strip mall, a community center that only filled up on weekends. These were the exact locations that every vending YouTube guru tells you to chase, because the foot traffic numbers look great on paper. But foot traffic doesn't buy snacks. Captive employees do. The winners were almost without exception places where the same 20 to 80 people showed up 5 days a week, ate lunch in the same break room, and had no other convenient option for a Snickers bar or a Diet Coke. Manufacturing floors, auto body shops, independent trucking dispatch offices, a regional FedEx ground sorting facility he landed in 2017 that single-handedly generated $1,940 a month in net profit from one machine for the next 6 years. By 2018, Danny had quietly culled 14 of his worst-performing machines, sold them to a competitor in Fresno for $11,200 in cash, and used the money to acquire 3 locations from a retiring operator in Lancaster. Those 3 machines were placed in a single industrial park anchored by an aerospace parts manufacturer. Net profit in month 1, $4,300. He had stumbled onto his next big lesson, which was that buying existing routes from tired operators was almost always cheaper per dollar of cash flow than building from scratch. From 2018 onward, more than half of his growth came from acquisitions of 3 to 8 machines at a time from older guys who were exhausted, divorced, sick, or just done dragging cases of Doritos up loading docks at 58 years old. And this is the part of the story that nobody tells you, the part that explains how a guy from Tehachapi went from 1 machine to 47. Without ever taking a loan from a bank. By 2019, Danny was netting somewhere around $186,000 a year from the vending operation, working what he estimated was 18 to 22 hours a week on the route, mostly early mornings and Sunday afternoons. He quit Firestone the previous year, but he kept the mechanic work going out of a shop he built behind his house, taking only the customers he liked and charging cash rates that would make a dealership service writer faint. He drove the same F-150. He and his wife Marisol still lived in the same 3-bedroom ranch they'd bought in 2013 for $217,000. Their 2 kids went to public school. They took 1 vacation a year, usually to Marisol's family in Guadalajara, and every dollar that wasn't going to taxes, groceries, or the occasional new transmission for the truck was going into 2 places, more machines, and a brokerage account at Fidelity that Danny didn't touch. So how does a 47-machine route end up selling for $3.2 million? Because by 2022, Danny's books showed something almost unheard of in the vending industry. $612,000 in annual gross revenue, $341,000 in net profit after all expenses, including a part-time helper he'd hired in 2020, and a customer concentration so spread out that no single location accounted for more than 7% of revenue. He had route density that meant his average drive time between machines was 11 minutes. He had contracts, real written contracts, with 18 of his top grossing locations locking in placement for 3 to 5 years. And he had 9 years of clean tax returns, organized by an actual CPA, sitting in a binder ready for any buyer's due diligence team. When a private equity-backed vending consolidator out of Phoenix reached out in early 2023, looking to expand into Central California, Danny had the rarest thing a small business owner can offer a sophisticated buyer. A turnkey operation with documented financials, recurring revenue, low owner involvement, and 0 skeletons. The first offer was $2.4 million. Danny said no and went back to restocking machines. The second offer, 3 months later, was $2.9 million, plus a 6-month consulting agreement at $12,000 a month. Danny said no again. The third offer, in July of 2023, was $3.2 million all cash at closing with a 90-day handoff period, and Danny signed the letter of intent the same afternoon over a plate of enchiladas at his cousin's restaurant. Now, here's what you actually need to take from this if you're sitting there doing the math on your own situation, because Danny's story is not a get-rich-quick template. It's a get-rich-eventually blueprint, and there are 3 things he did that almost nobody else does. The first lesson is to obsess over the unit economics of every single location before you ever think about scaling. Danny tracked 4 numbers per machine for 9 straight years. He knew within 30 days whether a location was a winner or a loser, and he had the discipline to kill losers fast and double down on winners. Most operators get emotionally attached to bad locations because they remember the work it took to land them. Danny treated every machine like a stock position. If the dividend wasn't there in 90 days, he sold it or moved it. The second lesson is that captive audiences crush foot traffic every single time. Forget what looks busy. What you want is the same people, in the same place, with no other options, 5 days a week. A break room with 30 workers and 1 machine will out-earn a busy gas station 3 to 1 over a 5-year span. Danny built his fortune on auto shops, manufacturing floors, and logistics warehouses, not on the glamorous high-traffic locations that get all the attention. The third lesson, and maybe the most important, is that the real money in any cash-flowing small business isn't in the monthly profit. It's in the multiple you can sell it for at the end. Danny netted around $1.8 million in cumulative profit over 9 years of operation, but he made another $3.2 million in a single afternoon because he had built something a sophisticated buyer wanted to own. Clean books, low owner dependency, diversified revenue, and signed contracts. If you're building any kind of business, build it from day one to be sellable, even if you never plan to sell, because the day you change your mind, you'll be glad you did. Danny still wrenches on cars 3 days a week. He coaches his son's Little League team. His Fidelity account, between the sale proceeds and the 9 years of compounded contributions, now sits north of $4.6 million invested in low-cost index funds. He drives a slightly newer F-150 now, a 2021 model he bought used. Marisol still works part-time at the elementary school because she likes it. They never moved out of the ranch house. But the question that haunts every viewer who hears this story is the same one Danny himself started asking in late 2023, sitting on a pile of cash and staring at the ceiling at 3 in the morning. What's the next business you build when you already have enough money to never work again?